Today we'll be going through a character build for the Eldritch Archer, a character designed to use the arcane arts to augment their abilities on the battlefield. Hi, I'm Yovel and I'll be going through core features of the build and discuss the decisions why they were chosen. We are starting with a halfling of the Orthoban's ethnicity, hailing from the ancient Thessalonian city of Edessaril. Our gutsy heritage will represent our halfling's inclinations towards fighting, adventuring, and working together to take down dangerous threats. Distracting Shadows is our first level feat, and this allows the Eldritch Archer to sneak in combat to move and avoid aggro from hostile enemies. Ceaseless Shadows at level 13 increases the effectiveness of cover from medium and large creatures to reduce retaliation from hostile range attacks and spellcasters. Our background reflects the history of the Orthoban halfling hailing from Edessaril. This represents the Eldritch Archer's inclinations towards magic and explains their unique style of magic melding into their magical archery. As Thessala was the archaic god of magic, disappearing into the rivers of time, our Eldritch Archer started to become a follower of the current god of magic, Nethys. We are starting with the base class of a fighter. The fighter allows the Eldritch Archer to fully maximize their chance to hit foes with strikes, as it starts off expert in weapons and then slowly progresses to legendary proficiency. Our first level feat is Point Blank Shot to mitigate the penalty of shooting hostile foes within 30 feet if we are using a longbow, or boost to the effectiveness of a short bow. Double Shot is the Eldritch Archer's primary form of dealing damage to foes, as each strike leads to increased chances of criticals and dealing guaranteed static damage with weapon specialization. The Triple Shot feat adds an additional attack to the Double Shot action, potentially allowing 4 strikes in a single round with the initial penalty of -4. This penalty is reduced by the multi-shot stance. Despite the limitation of not moving and reactivating the stance every time you do move, it is still more effective to combine this with a triple shot in a single round compared to striking individually and allowing the multi-attack penalty impacting on the effectiveness of the second and third strike. The Eldritch Archer allows options of augmenting the arrows and allowing spellcasting to add effects to each strike. The ability that is received with the dedication is the Eldritch Shot. This reaction ability is generally weaker than using all 3 actions to go into the multi-shot stance and then using a triple shot, or a spellcaster using a spell slot to deal a lot of damage to one target or spread over multiple targets. If one wanted to use the Eldritch Shot, we would be going through some options to determine which ones are viable. As mentioned before, the Eldritch Archer augments arrow strikes, and the Precious Arrow is one such ability. Turning an arrow into cold iron, silver, or adamantine helps with dealing extra damage against creatures such as Fae, lycanthropes, and bypassing the resistance from golem creatures. The Seeker Arrow works well with the Halfling's Distracting Shadow and the Ceaseless Shadow bonuses, as it allows them to strike at foes without taking penalties due to allies' positioning and cover. Fae's Arrow is an enhanced version of the Seeker Arrow that gains bonuses against hostile creatures that are wearing armor. This would be useful against creatures of the humanoid subtype, as they would normally use armor in place of natural options. Arrow of Death on average deals less damage than the Eldritch Archer's triple shot action and remaining actions for arrow strikes. While saying this, the benefit of this ability is the chance of killing foes outright, and there is no immunity to this ability once it has been used on them. This will be useful against specific targets such as spellcasters due to their weakened physical statistics and potentially lower fortitude saves. The Eldritch Archer dedication provides spellcasting options, the first which is received at level 8. The cantrips available to work with the Eldritch Shot includes Acid Splash, Produce Flame, Ray of Frost, and Telekinetic Projectile. Acid Splash has a chance of dealing persistent acid damage on a critical hit, but unfortunately the spell damage progresses at half the rate of the other spells, ending at 4d6 acid and 5 persistent acid on a critical. Produce Flame is the next spell which is preferred for the Eldritch Archer, as while the d4 points of fire damage is underwhelming, the chance of dealing 9d4 persistent fire damage means that once it's occurred, the Eldritch Archer can move on to other attack patterns while residual damage continues in the background. Ray of Frost has a secondary effect of reducing the target's speed on a critical hit, which makes it an underwhelming version of the Produce Flame cantrip. And lastly, Telekinetic Projectile. It has the highest damage output of the 4 cantrips, dealing d6 damage instead of the d4s. The basic spell dedication grants the Eldritch Archer spell slots as they level up. A suitable spell for the first level slot would be True Strike, further ensuring they have a chance to hit and deal a critical strike on the target. Invisibility allows utility for the Eldritch Archer, enabling them to get into a prime sniping position or striking the boss monster with an arrow of death and potentially getting a critical hit due to the flat-footed condition. Haste further improves the Eldritch Archer's damage per round, boosting their normal attack options to 5 shots with 1 triple shot and 2 normal strikes, or allowing 2 arrow strikes with using precious arrows on the first and third actions against troublesome creatures. Dimension Door is an emergency escape button, allowing the Eldritch Archer to reposition themselves if they're caught in an enemy's ambush or was flanked from behind. And Disintegrate is an alternative to the Arrow of Death, dealing slightly more damage and can make using the Eldritch Strike worth it in combination with the spell. The skills helpful for the Eldritch Archer are more focused on the different battlefields they may encounter enemies. Acrobatics helps the Eldritch Archer tumble through and escape grapples against foes that want to shut down high amounts of damage each round. Steady balance helps if the Eldritch Archer wants to balance on surfaces such as boulders or ledges that are deemed optimal places to strike foes. Kip Up helps the Eldritch Archer move away from foes that would try to trip and lock them down, or help with getting into position after being healed from unconsciousness. Arcana helps the Eldritch Archer identify magic sources. An Arcane Sense allows them to detect magic on hostile targets or even sense illusions and invisible users on the battlefield, giving opportunities for the Seeker Arrow feat to be used. Athletics allows the Eldritch Archer to reach the aforementioned boulders and prime sniping locations. The Eldritch Archer uses arrows, which are consumables, and will need to have the capacity to carry large amounts if going on an adventure of an unknown period of time. The Stealth skill allows the Eldritch Archer to fully maximize the opportunities given through the Distracting and Ceaseless Shadow Ancestry feats. Foil senses are for those creatures that use Tremor Sense or Scent to track their targets. And Swift Sneak allows the Eldritch Archer to move into position quicker or escape from searching targets. Moving on to equipment. We have the options of the Composite Longbow and the Composite Shortbow. The longbow has a higher range with 100 foot, but comes with the volley trait, which is mitigated by the point blank shot feat. The shortbow doesn't have the volley trait, thus it gains a +2 hit bonus from the same feat. The choice between the two bows really depends on what type of adventure you're going on. The longbow is more suited for outdoor adventures where targets might be at greater distances, where the shortbow really works in enclosed spaces, whether it's on a dungeon crawl or in more urban settings. Leather armor and the explorer's clothing are the two options for the Eldritch Archer, as dexterity would be their highest stat. Eventually, both equipment will not stay in pace with the Eldritch Archer's dexterity once it reaches +6 at high levels, and +7 with the apex item if one chooses to go with a dexterity boosting variant. The only benefit to the leather armor is that it's from the light armor family, thus runes like the invisibility can be etched upon the armor, freeing up that spell slot for another spell of your choice. Here we can see the Eldritch Archer working with teammates dealing with hostile creatures. Whether they be constructs, bandits, or otherworldly beings, the Eldritch Archer excels in dealing constant damage to foes with using the fighter feats or using the precious arrows to take advantage of specific weaknesses. In addition, the Eldritch Archer can use haste on themselves to further maximize the damage output per round, further increasing their capacity to support their allies. In situations where allies are providing lesser cover due to being in melee, Seeker arrows and Phase arrows are options to bypass this, especially if positioning is limited due to other fights and the terrain itself. In the circumstances where the Eldritch Archer gains too much aggro from hostile creatures as they can see it as a significant threat to their survival, options such as Dimension Door and Invisibility helps them reposition while minimizing retaliation. In the event where the creatures are smart and use tactics such as tripping and grapple, the acrobatic skill Kip Up and increasing ranks in acrobatics help the Eldritch Archer deal with those circumstances. And here we have a summary of all the chosen feats, skills, and items discussed in today's video, including the source books used to create this character. I've also included character sheets for the Eldritch Archer in the description box below. They range from level 1 through to level 20. Thank you for watching. If you'd enjoyed today's video, leave a like and subscribe. Also comment your thoughts on the Eldritch Archer below. Till next time.